Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. My review for today is for the 1941 Lon Chaney Jr. starring Universal Monsters flick, The Wolfman. I watched this again recently during October to try to get in some horror reviews and whatnot for my life, and I love this movie. I've seen it maybe 2 or 3 times now, and I absolutely loved it. I saw it a few years ago for the first time. This is the DVD I got many years ago when I wanted to start getting into Universal Monsters, around 2014 when they did the Dracula Untold releases. And I got into this. It's a really good flick. Really enjoyed this. Lon Chaney Jr. brings so much to this movie, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit. First, I kind of want to start off with my collection and also kind of my introduction to the Wolfman. The first time I ever really learned about the Wolfman, aside from some little rip-offs and references here and there, every kid has seen a cartoon that has the Wolfman or a version of that somewhere in there. One of the earliest ones I ever saw was the Universal-produced Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman. I don't know when this came out. There's also one involving Frankenstein. I don't know which one came out before the other one, but I love both. I still own both on VHS, like this. Still in there, like brand new. And I love it to death. It is phenomenal. And then you have the Wolfman Complete Legacy Collection, which came out in, I want to say, 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. I think it came out in 2014 as a re-release again with that. Of course, the films collected in here are pretty much all the Wolfman-involved movies, as in the 1941 film, The Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which is the direct sequel to The Wolfman. Of course, that came out in 43. Really great flick. House of Frankenstein, which is 1944. House of Dracula, which came out in 1945. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which is 1948. Films that came out before this, well, one of them at least, Werewolf of London, which just came out in 1935. Really good flick, by the way. A lot of this film came from that movie. Really good flick. I really recommend that. She-Wolf of London came out in 1946, which is 5 years after this original Wolfman movie. I got this box set about 3 or 4 years ago. I had not seen all these other movies. I still haven't seen She-Wolf of London. I still haven't seen that movie yet, so I hope it's a good one too. But I have this. I think it was either last year or the year before they did a glow-in-the-dark Complete Legacy Collection cover like I did with my Dracula. I showed you my previous Dracula review before this video, and I bought that as well as all the other monsters in that collection. And I'll tell you one thing. I actually saw the remake from 2010 before I saw the original 1941 film, and I love this as well. It's not perfect, but I do love this. I also love the novelization from Jonathan Mayberry, one of my favorite writers, the writer of the Pine Deep trilogy and the Joe Ledger series, the Rotten Ruins series. He's an incredible writer. You should check him out. That novelization is even better than this movie. If you like this movie, you'll love that novel even more. Anyway, The Wolfman. I'm a huge fan of this flick. It's phenomenal. It's so well done. This is one of the best of the best of the best. Of course, where Dracula lacks music, this really makes up for it with that. Where there's a little bit of a slowness to some of the movies, this movie does not have that. It's consistently fast-paced all the time. It just runs and runs and runs, and it's so good in its pacing. The characters are fantastic here. Claude Rains is in the flick. As I believe it's Lawrence Talbot's father. Of course, Lawrence Talbot is Lon Chaney Jr. It's amazing hearing the things about how Lon Chaney Jr.'s father, Lon Chaney Sr., the Phantom of the Opera himself, did not want his son to become an actor. And then you see him in this movie, and he's phenomenal. His career really didn't go anywhere, from what I can tell. He was in a lot of things, but not in important roles. But Lon Chaney Jr. is so perfect in this movie. He's so perfect in this movie. No one has ever been able to top this role, in my opinion. He's so good. It's one of my favorite horror movies. It's just plain out iconic. Everything about it's iconic. Even the Werewolf Lore in this movie. Werewolf films have been done before. Like I said, the Werewolf of London had been done before. There were so many things that have been done before with this type of movie, with a werewolf type of thing, that just weren't done the way this movie was. This movie is so good. It's so powerful. It's so important and fun and scary and funny at times. The romantic aspects are really good. Now, Lawrence Talbot comes back into town to visit his father. Of course, they're wealthy. He's well-to-do. And he happens to be looking at a telescope his father happens to have. And he happens to have it just misdirected just a little bit where he happens to be looking into town. He's looking around the town. He happens to look through the window of a young woman who is very beautiful. And he goes into town to meet her and act like he's a psychic, which is very charming, very cool. That's the thing is, too, you know, Lon Chaney Jr. himself had a very charming way about him. He seems like a taller guy. Very rugged, handsome type of look to him. And he just fits this role. He's very sympathetic. He's a very gentleman type. And he and this woman he wants to go on a date with, when he kind of charms her into going on a date, she wants to bring another lady with them to go out on kind of just a third wheel type of thing. Probably for her own protection, too. And they go out to where gypsies are, and they happen to have Bela Lugosi out there, playing a gypsy named Bela, as a matter of fact. There's kind of a cool little thing here that I really dig. Bela the gypsy, played by Bela Lugosi, is also a werewolf. And that night that they're visiting out there in the woods to see these gypsies and have like their fortune told and whatever, Bela turns into his werewolf and he pretty much attacks all of them. And Lon Chaney Jr. gets bit in the process. The third wheel lady, not the love interest of Lon Chaney Jr., but the third wheel lady actually gets killed. And Lon Chaney Jr. is down for the count for a while with that, scar on his chest. It heals up meticulously, though. And nobody knows why. Or not meticulously. I can't even talk. I'm so stupid. Miraculously, it heals up. And he doesn't really know how. It looked like a pretty savage one. Now, the thing that I thought was cool is you start finding out some of the lore in this movie, because as Lawrence Talbot starts to struggle with where he's actually possibly becoming a werewolf after he beats this one wolf that bit him to death, and that Bela guy turns out to be either missing or dead or both too, we learn more and more about the werewolf lore in this flick, in the sense of, like, for example, the particular day that a character that may be bitten is going to turn into the werewolf, or the Wolfman, the Wolfwoman, or whatever, they're going to see their next victim's palm at some point. They're going to see like a pentagram in their palm. And they're going to know that's going to be the person I'm going to kill next. It could be anybody. It could be your parent, your brother, your sister, your wife, husband. It could be anybody. It could be a complete stranger, and you're going to see it at some point. You're going to know that's my next victim. That's kind of cool. That's never been done in anything I've ever seen in my entire life, and this is one of the first films to do that. I've never seen that. I don't know if that's an urban legend thing or a myth thing or what. I don't know what it is, but I've never seen that done in anything ever growing up. And being a big horror fan, you think I would have seen that by now. I've never seen anything like that. That is such a cool lore thing that I've never seen done. The music is great here. It's very emotional in a lot of ways. The performances are great, whether it be from Lon Chaney Jr., who makes this whole movie. Every scene that he's in it, he just takes up this whole movie. Claude Rains is great in here. Of course, the Invisible Man himself. He makes up a lot of this movie being great. The love interest girl, she's great in it too. Even the third wheel lady was solid in this. Bela Lugosi playing Bela the Gypsy. He's good in his little small role in this flick. There's so many great characters in here. There's the one lead gypsy. She's a female lady. She's really good in this. She's kind of the lady that kind of, I want to say, gives a little bit of advice to Lawrence as he struggles with his situation about whether he's becoming a werewolf or not. And there's kind of this thing where you don't entirely know if he really is becoming a wolf or not. Sometimes you think so, and sometimes you think not. There's a lot of times it's possible maybe he's not. Maybe he's just going crazy. He thinks in his head that he is the Wolfman. There's a lot of debate on that. I think there's a lot of debate to say he is turning into the Wolfman, in my personal opinion. But it's so cool. I really like that about it. And again, to find out things from this film, like the transformation scenes, turning into the Wolfman, look great. They look great. They genuinely look great. You don't see a whole lot of it, but when you do see it, it looks really good. Again, a lot of that's borrowed from The Werewolf of London that came out like 5 or 6 years before this movie. But it still looks good from the same studio. It still looks like good transitions, in my opinion. I like the way he creeps around. I love the shot of him out in the woods, the Wolfman himself, walking through the woods with the smoke all over at the place and like the fog and the matte paintings in the background, the trees. It looks iconic, and it totally is. It's just an amazing place. I love it so much. I don't know how to describe it. If you haven't seen the flick before, you have seen this reference somewhere. It's one of those things like Dracula or Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein or The Mummy or Creature from the Black Lagoon or any of these things, Psycho. You've seen these things referenced all over the place when you were growing up watching cartoons and movies and whatnot, and this is a great example of that. It's just plain iconic in all the right ways, for all the right reasons, too. And I think for the most part, I think this is a better flick than Dracula. I think Dracula, of course, is a scary flick, sometimes between Renfield and Bela Lugosi's performance as Dracula himself being so tense and scary. Van Helsing's banter with Dracula is great in there, but it also has some slow parts. Whereas I think The Wolfman is a perfect Universal Monsters flick. It's one of the very few that I feel that way about. I think Frankenstein's one, I think this is one. Some of the comedy ones, like the Abbott and Costello ones, I think are perfect too, for what they are. They're technically horror comedies, and no matter whether you want to consider that or not. We're used to Tucker and Dale nowadays, but still, this is great. I love it. It's a 5 out of 5 star rating for me. I just adore it. It's one of my top favorites in all of the horror Universal Monster stuff. It's just an iconic piece of work. I love it so much. To think that this came out so much later than all the other ones, like Invisible Man, and so on, Dracula, Frankenstein, whatever. It's amazing to me how impactful this one is. And then to get a tie-in with Frankenstein, have that kind of versus movie, one of the first versus movies, if not the very first to ever exist, is just showing how Universal did this whole cinematic universe way before anybody else even thought about it. And they did it right a lot of the time. But anyway, that's my thoughts. 5 out of 5 stars for me. What are your thoughts on The Wolfman? Did you love this movie? Did you hate this movie? Did you love the remake? Did you hate the remake? I would love to see another one. There's this talk now about Ryan Gosling being in the flick. I'm curious about that remake, whether it's going to happen or not. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear all that down below. I love Wolfman. It's one of the best ones out there, dude. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it to you, especially if you're a big fan of the Universal Monsters and you haven't seen this for whatever reason. You absolutely have to. Anyway, thank you for watching. Merry Christmas. God bless you, and goodbye.